And welcome back. The Natural Areas Conservancy is a not-for-profit organization that's actually dedicated to preserving New York City's 20,000 acres of forests and wetlands and promoting nature's diversity and resiliency across New York City's 5 boroughs. The NAC released the first comprehensive report on New York City's carbon budget for its forested natural areas. The report is the first of its rigorous calculation of the amount of carbon stored in urban forested natural areas using field collection data. Joining us to provide their point of view on the matter, I'm joined by the conservation scientist and deputy director of conservation science at Natural Areas Conservancy, Clara Pregitzer, and thank you so much for being with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. And so, as we said, this report in itself is like the first. And so give us a little bit about the report and what exactly it means.
Sure. So, as you said, our organization really focuses on protecting and preserving natural areas. And one of the ways we view forests is for their ecosystem values. So trees provide a lot of benefits, but one of the benefits that they provide is storing and sequestering carbon. And so that had never been calculated in a rigorous way in New York City. And so our organization sort of took that on. And this report sort of highlights the importance of natural areas in one of the ways that trees are important, and that's in storing and sequestering carbon. And so we sort of break that down by the numbers and describe the importance of forests in that way.
And so let me cut in and ask the question a little bit about the importance of urban forests, particularly, across New York City. We talked about the amount of acreage that is dedicated, but the importance of urban forests.
Yeah, so forests are very important for a lot of different reasons. I think there's a lot of social benefits. So I think we can think about this pandemic, and just visiting the woods and spending time in nature can, make you feel more calm, being able to see wildlife in the city. And the Bronx has over 2,000 acres of forest, and some of the nicest forest in the city is found in the Bronx. And so there's a lot of those social benefits, but then the benefits, I think, when we think about climate change and emissions from fossil fuels, trees are this really, really cool sort of natural sponge for carbon. And so they take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and then store it in their leaves and wood, and then release oxygen back into the atmosphere. And so ensuring that we have our healthy forests for the future. And so that assessment of the native canopy, but the non-native understory kind of shows that the trajectory of the forest, or the future of the forest, might not be as healthy in the future. And so we've really got to think about ways to protect that forest for the future, and ensure that we're not just storing carbon, but providing important wildlife, the cooling benefits that we see of forests. And so yeah, the work that our organization has done is really looked at the condition of the forest and what it might look like in the future.
Yeah. And so we have the show, it's called the Social Justice Forum, right? And so I talk to people about environmental justice, which is also a part of social justice as well. But give us a little bit about your perspective on really dealing with this matter, because to some people, they may not be so familiar, but the effects are far reaching.
Yeah, so I think one of the things our organization really focuses on is forests across the entire city, so across all 5 boroughs. And a lot of natural areas are found in the Bronx, Staten Island, Queens. And so I think ensuring that we have healthy forests for everybody to explore and experience, is something our city should really focus on, and ensuring that we're providing resources to take care of these forests for the future across the whole city is also critically important. And so no matter the borough that you're living in, or sort of what neighborhood you are in the city, I think having access to a healthy forest is something that we could strive for.
As I was preparing for talking to you, one of the notes that stuck out for me was about forested natural areas, and I was taken aback a little bit by the fact that forest natural areas actually store 3 times more carbon than all of New York City's street trees.
Yeah, yeah. So I think when you think about natural areas or forested natural areas, they're concentrations of a lot of trees. And so forested natural areas account for just a quarter of the tree canopy in New York City. So when you think about all the trees that exist in New York City, and getting sort of a bird's eye view of what that looks like from above, one of the ways we measure the amount of forest or the amount of tree cover we have is by these maps of tree canopy. And natural areas are a minority, so they're just a quarter, but they store the majority of carbon for the whole city. Um, and for street trees, they store 3 times as much carbon as the whole street tree population. And so the street trees, are widespread across the whole city. You can see them on the street, but they're really cared for in a really different way, and they have really different benefits and than natural areas. And so they're both important, but if you think about having a tree on your street or sidewalk, it's so valuable for shade, for cooling your house maybe, but that's really different than taking a walk in the woods or having a place to kind of look up at the tree canopy. And so, yeah, so I think there's a little over 600,000 street trees in New York
Mhm.
City, but there's over 5 million trees in natural areas. So when you think about carbon stored, these natural areas are really, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck in terms of carbon storage.
What can the public do in order to make the situation better?
Yeah, so I think understanding a little bit about the sort of where the natural areas are in your neighborhood. So starting with just exploring your neighborhood and exploring the parks in the city, and then there's a lot of opportunities to volunteer. To help take care of the forest. So the Natural Areas Conservancy, as well as New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, hosts volunteer events, and when it's safe to do so, um, coming together and planting trees or removing invasive species is something that we would love to have people take a part in. But I think just enjoying the parks and enjoying the natural areas and communicating with people about their importance is also something that people can do.
Yeah, we've heard a lot, recently in news about how forests could possibly be a part of a solution, if you will, towards climate change. I know a lot of people don't agree with that. I just want to get your thoughts on that, because when we hear that, forests and, the expendability and climate change, what are your thoughts that come to mind?
Yeah, so I think natural climate solutions or forests as a solution or planting trees as a solution definitely is important, but of course that's not the only solution. And so when we think about the ways that we need to address climate change, we really need to come at it with a lot of different approaches and have sort of a diverse portfolio in terms of tackling this huge problem. And so I think planting trees and taking care of our existing forests is something we 100% should do, but that doesn't that doesn't take care of reducing transportation emissions or thinking about new alternative ways for energy. So I think there's a lot of different approaches that are needed, and you can kind of view nature-based solutions or planting trees or taking care of our forests as one of the many ways in which we can help tackle or address the problem of climate change.
Yeah, and there is a fight for climate change all across the United States, more particularly here in New York City. What are you hearing? What are you seeing in regards to that fight?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I guess I feel like there's a lot of, I guess I'm not sure I know exactly how to answer that question. Maybe I'll say that I think there's, we can look at green space solutions. We can look at the things that the city could potentially do. I think looking ahead at, potentially the next mayoral race or the ways in which, our city tackles climate change, and really situating natural areas as a part of that solution. I think our report on this carbon budget, I think, sort of captures for the first time the value that natural areas in New York City and the value that they have and the potential role that they could play. So ensuring that we can sort of situate the best available science and information into policy solutions is something I think we should be looking ahead towards. But I think, there's a lot of climate change challenges that the city will face, including sea level rise, and focusing on ensuring we have healthy coastal wetlands, I think is another approach. And then I think kind of looking at our transportation and the many ways that our city sort of views energy as well could be important too. But yeah, our work really focuses on natural areas, and so I think my answer is a little bit weighted towards natural solutions.
Totally understood. No, totally understood there. Let me go back to your report for a minute and talk a little bit about some of your findings. What were some of the key things that stuck out in your report that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think the fact that we found that natural areas in New York City are storing and sequestering carbon at the same rate as rural forests. So when you look at sort of on a per unit basis, the forests in New York City are functioning in a very similar way than you might see forests functioning in the Adirondacks or the Catskills. And so I think highlighting the fact that we have healthy and high functioning forests right here in New York City, and we need to take care of them. Another thing I think we found in our report is that we have healthy forests that are storing a lot of carbon, and then we have really degraded forests, our non-native vinelands that are not storing as much carbon. And so the fact that we really need to focus on managing and protecting our existing forests and moving it on a trajectory towards healthy forests. So looking at our the natural resource of forests in New York City as a whole, and thinking about how can we ensure that we're managing and protecting these lands to be resources for the whole city, but also providing as much benefit as they possibly can. And then I think, the fact that we found that just in a quarter of the tree canopy, we have most of the carbon being stored in New York City, I think that provides a new way to look at natural areas and sort of view this resource as incredibly important for climate change and climate policy. But there's a lot of different green spaces in New York City.
And for an average person who may be a novice, right, how do you define what's called a quote unquote healthy forest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of ways that a lot of different metrics that you can think about, but thinking about the species that exist there. So here in New York City, we have a lot of different forest types because we're right in between the Mid-Atlantic and New England ecoregions. So, and we're a coastal city, and so we have a wide variety of native plants here. So having native plants in our forest is something we look at as being a healthy element of the forest. And the reason being is that these plants are situated and adapted to living here in New York City, and they provide a lot of habitat for many plants and animals. But it's not just about the species, it's also about the forest structure. And so thinking about having a lot of different sizes of trees, so having really big trees in the canopy, but also having small tree seedlings that are regenerating, that's an indicator of a healthy forest because it ensures that that forest could be self-sustaining. And so those are some of the things we look for when we think about a healthy forest.
Yeah. And so for people who want to find out more information about your report and the work that you've done, how do they go about doing that?
Our report is on our website, so you can go to www.naturalareas.nyc.org, and we have all of the full report as well as a one-page summary, or I think it's a two-page summary that describes our main findings.
And for you, I want to ask the question also. We talked to everybody on the show and ask about how does COVID-19 actually impact the work that you do. And so can you share with us a little bit about maybe how COVID-19 has impacted the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. So, well, for one, we're not in our offices, as I think, most of, or many people in New York City are not in their offices. So I think there's a lot sort of missing from our just sort of office interactions, but we've adapted, I think, really well to that. But another project that I work on is managing a program called the Forest and Cities Program. And so we are bringing together a group of practitioners and leaders that focus on the science and management of forests in 12 cities across the US. And one of the things we did this summer, which was different because of COVID, was we asked them about COVID. So we conducted a survey about how has COVID impacted the work of natural areas and cities across the US. And for ourselves too, one thing we found is that more people are visiting natural areas and cities because if you're in an apartment all day, you want to get outside, and a good place to do that is in your public park. And so we've really tried to raise some awareness about the importance of natural areas and ensuring that we have funding to take care of them. I think the fact that city budgets are being cut, not just in New York City for park care, but in cities across the US, that kind of ensuring that we fight for this resource and the protection of this resource for the future is something we've shifted towards now that we're in this COVID world.
Yeah, we're all navigating. We're trying to do the best job that we possibly can. Clara, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us here on the Social Justice Forums.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
All righty, and listen, we want you to stay connected to us. Guess what? We're going to take a quick break. We got more show when we return coming up right after this.